there. Yeah, he is there. So I just want to, I'm going to keep introducing Brian until we get to the general meeting, and then I'll introduce him one last time. Some of you may have been on the meeting the other night and already met him, but Brian Williams is with us, and he's, starting full steam ahead as of this week.
Great, thank you, Sean.
Terrific. We're glad to have you.
And welcome, Brian.
Brian.
Hey, Brian, welcome.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you so much.
All right, so I guess with that, let's get this bylaws committee meeting started. Thanks again for everyone for attending and moving this process forward. I did put together at least an outline of issues we've identified, and including some from the last meeting. We said last time that for purposes of today, we'll try to tackle Articles 1 through 4 of the bylaws, which that's basically the first. It amounts to about 2.5 pages, 3 pages of the bylaws, and I guess I'll flip back and forth because I have a version of the bylaws that I marked up in accordance with the suggestions here. Most of the items are based on proposed edits and comments that I and Nikki made. There was also some issues highlighted at the last meeting that tried to work in. Some of them were matched what certain suggestions that Nikki and I made when we marked up the document separately. But there might be others that I missed, or that as we go through it, that come to people's minds. So feel free to speak up or raise your hand if there's something that comes up that you want to address as we go through this. I am not able to see raised hands, but hopefully Jonathan is and can call out when folks want to speak up, and we will go through it that way. So unless if anyone wants to raise anything at the outset, I'm more than happy to dive into section 1, because I think we do have a decent amount of stuff to cover here, and I'm not sure how long it's going to take. So, but if anyone has anything they want to, yeah, go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah. So I don't know if it would be. I'm just going to throw it out there for you because right now you got the screen. Would it be more advantageous, do you think, for us to see the bylaws as they are right now, and then refer to the notes on the discussion as we go through with everybody, and then do suggested edit mode on a version of the current bylaws, so that the changes that we form consensus on as we go now, we could just sort of go as we read the bylaws, we could keep track of the changes as we make consensus, achieve consensus on making those changes. What do you think about?
I can do my best in terms of trying to do that based on how I lay my screen out. So right now, hopefully this is the view of the current board bylaws. It shouldn't show track changes right now because I have it in original view. So this is the current.
This is what I see right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, anybody. I see the suggested notes for tonight's meeting, but I don't see the bylaws.
You don't see the bylaws?
Yeah, I don't see the bylaws. Maybe
Okay.
you're sharing.
All right. So I see. I was flipping through on my screen, so I think I see what I have to do. Okay.
Eva and Jonathan, I'm not sure if it's helpful, but I did share a link here, but I also sent everyone on the committee a link in their email if you are interested in editing the live document that's in the drive. Just to let you guys know, that's an option there for you.
Oh, Anya, are you gonna be making note of the changes as we agree to them? Because then maybe
No.
that simplifies it.
No. No,
Mm-mm.
Okay.
I
That
think
was,
someone else from the committee had agreed to do that.
Okay. All right. So then, Steve, I don't know if it makes sense to use the live doc then, if that would be better. The one that they're referencing from the Google Drive link that was sent out.
Okay, I can do that.
feel free to do it however you're comfortable though, guys. I was just
Mhm.
available.
No, but that makes sense because then it's instant. Everybody will be able to see whatever the proposed changes are as we go. It
I
seems like
might.
one less clerical step in the process.
If it's possible, right, because I have on my desktop the split screen with the original bylaws and the proposed changes, so I can see. And if we can do that for everybody, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, and that would be the idea would be as we come to a consensus on a change as we go, you'll be able to see the original wording and then the proposed new wording right there. So that way it'll be very clear for everybody if they're looking at the screen. So I think that would make it easier.
This, can you see on my screen the current bylaws?
Yeah, the current bylaw is in your Word document, in your
Yeah.
Microsoft Word window. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Is it okay if we
That's
work off
easier
of
for
this?
you, then we'll just do that. Whatever is easier to get things rolling.
I think so, but.
Okay.
All right.
And
So,
you could blow it up. Just get it to full screen width, just saying to make it easier for everybody to read it.
better?
I think that works. If it works for everybody else, then it works for me.
Okay. I think working from the top, so we can cover the, I think for section 1, article 1 name, I think someone mentioned this in last week and I agree. I think it might've been Ann that mentioned it. The trying to refer to terms with capitals is usually the preferred approach. So the only suggestion that I think we had for section 1 that I know of right now is capitalizing board. So the name of this organization shall be Community Board number 14, Brooklyn, New York City, here and after referred to as the board, basically just capitalizing the B in board. So that's it. If anyone has anything else for section 1, but that's it. It's just that one sentence naming referring to us as the board.
I fully second that change. There's no further comment or discussion. I guess we'll proceed.
All right, so let's work our way down to section 2. So this one, for purposes, this is a little more, this might be a little more involved in terms of if we want to modify purposes, and I think there was a little discussion about this last time. Let's try to tackle them maybe one at a time. So, and the other thing with capitalizing board, we'll carry that through. So that it carries through to section 2. So I guess the first thing for 2A was because we refer to the district, consider the needs of the district. So my proposal was to define district, so it's clearer what we're referring to, and I said Brooklyn Community District 14, which hopefully is the right term. So, but otherwise keeping the section 2A as it read. So consider the needs of Brooklyn Community District 14, the district, and develop plans for the district's welfare and orderly development. If anyone has any further thoughts on that, feel free to speak up. Anyone? Any hands?
I don't see any hands. I think we're good to proceed.
Okay. The next one was section 2B. And if you want me to flip back and forth between what was originally there and what our proposal is, I'm happy to switch off. But I also added semicolons to the end just to, try to be a little more grammatically sound. I don't know, but
Steve, does it not have the ability to show the strike through and the addition at the same time?
would you rather that view? I could do that.
It might be better, but we'll see what
Yeah.
everyone says when they see it.
So this is with the strike through.
Does that seem more confusing? Anyone who's super confused by that would rather see the other version?
Probably hard to see the balloons, so strike throughs might be preferable. I agree. So I think for B, just modest wording changes here and there. So advise the borough president, the New York City Planning Commission, and New York City departments or agencies with respect to any matter relating to the welfare of the district and its residents. I took out all New York City agencies because, I don't know, all seemed possibly a little over-inclusive. I don't know, maybe we do interact with all agencies, and my concern isn't warranted, but it just seemed a little odd to me that we think we advise all agencies. So yeah.
I mean, I think I'm not sure how the charter puts it, but I mean, most of this is derivative from the charter. It does say it says cooperate with, consult, assist, and advise any public officer, agency, local administrators of agencies, legislative body, or the borough president with respect to any matter relating to the welfare of the district and its residents. That's the straight quote from the city charter. So.
Okay. So should we try to match that? I didn't match it up to the charter language when I was working through this.
So your first one on A definitely matches D1 for like what each community board should do. So consider the needs of the district. You just spelled, you're proposing just being very explicit about community district 14. Then second, so number 2 in this list and B on our bylaws would be the blurb that I just read. So cooperate with, consult, assist, and advise any public officer, agency, so forth and so on. I think it's fine to mirror it. I mean, there's quite a list here from the city charter. So it's just a question of whether we could summarize it succinctly and essentially capture what needs to be captured, just so that it's clear from our bylaw. I mean, really, all this is derivative from the charter. We really can't expand the purposes beyond whatever the charter.
I think that
No, that's
the
a good
charter
point.
has something like 23 of these purposes
Yeah.
listed. And so the board, my recollection is the board sort of had a discussion about the extent to which you wanted to duplicate the charter versus the extent to which you wanted to defer the purposes as outlined by the city charter, and then not necessarily enumerate them. But if there are certain of those purposes that this board wants to highlight in order to sort of underscore its own culture, I think that that's fine to do it. And just to go to your simple question about the word all, Steve, I would keep I think the word all is fine because it would be, or change it to any, because it would be any agency or department with respect to any matter relating. So it would only be as matters arise whether or not we would interact with any given city agency. And certainly there are city agencies that have been invented since there was, for instance, a district service cabinet meeting. Like OEM isn't part of the cabinet because it came after the formation of cabinets. So I like keeping it vast in case new agencies show up from a service delivery point of view.
That makes sense. What if we in the very beginning said the purposes of the board shall be like comma consistent with New York City Charter section, whatever it is.
2800D.
Can I make a comment on this?
Yeah, go for it.
So this is an elect. So the first thing is, I think like I like what you just said, Steve. This is an electronic document, right? So it should say the purpose will be consistent with city charter, blah blah blah, and then just hyperlink to the city charter. Why not take advantage of that and then do what Sean said? I would not try and summarize because then you misinterpret. So I would say like what? Sorry, baby choking on something. And then I think do what Sean said, and Sean has often said this, the hyper-local nature of the community board, right? If there's something that's very culturally specific to this board, add it. But for me personally, this whole section should line up exactly with the city charter.
Okay.
I personally, I would concur with the idea of just referencing the section, and then if there is something we wish to highlight, I think honestly the first two are probably one of the most important to highlight if we're going to spell anything out, but we really could just say the purposes are in accordance with section 2800 of the New York City Charter. Something like that. Could do that too. And hyperlink to Nikki's.
If I might jump in here for just a second. Guys, if the two of you want to do this whole thing on your own, that's fine. But if you want the committee to actually participate, you should be paying attention to the hands that have been raised for quite a while.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Mine was very simple. If you're going to be this specific, then it should be the Brooklyn Borough President. That's all. But my point is just that there are a number of people raising their hands, and you should be calling on them, not just having a discussion.
I'm sorry, that's on me, you guys. You Steve, you said that you couldn't see the hand raised when you had the that screen.
Yeah, I can't see
so
him.
I'll feed in a little bit better. Glenn's hand and Carl, Henry, and Nicole have hands up, and I'll monitor that more closely.
Thank you.
So, Carl, Henry, you want to go?
Yeah, and so basically just wanted to build off of what Nikki and Glenn had said. And so when we last had the bylaws meeting, I had shared some comments on section 2B. And so I agree with the approach of hyperlinking with the charter. I'm just thinking that, you know, if we're going to spell this out in B, I think we could be general enough where I agree with Glenn. We call out that we're specifically talking about the Brooklyn Borough President. We call out the departments and agencies. We should also call out elected officials and maybe some general language regarding third parties.
Okay. I guess it would be helpful to line that up with the what the city charter says because yeah, just so long as we're being consistent.
To your, just to ask the clarification question, Carl Henry, when you say third parties, are you simply including other elected officials beyond district level and borough president, or are you talking about, let's say, like nonprofits and other advocacy organizations?
For me, third party is being defined as anyone outside of those explicitly listed entities, right? And so if you are not a city agency, if you are not a city department, if you are not the Brooklyn Borough President, if you are not an elected official, then you are a third party, whether it be for profit or nonprofit.
Okay. 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 Nikki, your hand was up. I don't know if you wanted to speak again or if that was from before. Oh, your hand is down now. So I guess I answered that question. Okay. I think I see
Joe Dweck has a hand up.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say overarching. What I think about in our own bylaws is that what's going to make us different than other community boards. If there's something specific, we should put it in. Otherwise, why don't we just leave it out and keep it simple and get guided by the laws of the city that are structuring and stating what the purpose of the particular community board is. We shouldn't get into those weeds. Leave it simple. If there's something special about us, like we were attacked years ago during community board meetings for the Korean grocer that we had to put stuff in. If things like that, fine. If there's not, let's just keep it simple. I don't see a reason to specify anything. Fine.
So just to clarify, you would just say the purposes of the board shall be those spelled out in New York City Charter, whatever section, and we'd move on unless if there's something specific we think we need to highlight.
I don't see why we get verbose about it.
Anyone else have I mean, should we, do we want to look through them and see if there's anything we want to in particular keep? Or, I mean, Jonathan, you seem to say that last time the intent was basically just to highlight several of them, if I'm understanding correctly. So the ones that are in there should basically mirror the charter.
Yeah, I mean, the first two definitely mirror the charter. Section D, Section 2800D, mirror it almost exactly, at least in the spirit of it. And then feedback to city departments. Yep, that's number 4 in this section. So basically, there's a regurgitation of basically what's there. Again, the only real purpose in spelling it out would be to highlight something for someone who doesn't have access to the city charter, and or to show people in the community what we're supposed to do. And if you look at, yeah, what you have there is F, kind of, it sort of outlines it. So it says, okay, anything else that we didn't mention here is whatever the charter says or other New York state law says. So I guess if there's a problem, or if there's a point that we want to particularly address in what's already written, then let's consider the alteration, like capitalizations or anything that's like Brooklyn Borough President being very clear. Maybe we put the catch-all of consistent with New York City Charter 2800 and replace the last paragraph with that. Anything else that's not, anything else that's also required of us in the city charter and New York state law.
Ann Godette and Glenn Woolen both have hands up.
Ann, why don't you go?
Hi, yeah. So I don't see the point of saying Brooklyn Borough President. This is Brooklyn Community Board 14 after all. So that's, to me, that's a bit redundant. As far as Carl Honre's earlier input about elected officials versus City Planning Commission and all city agencies, I do like the elected officials because there is that need for communications back and forth between the board members and the people that we interact with within the board district. So I like the idea of the elected officials. City agencies, sure, they can stay there. Third parties, that's sort of implied. If the board members on the committee feel it's redundant, leave it out, it doesn't matter. But I do really like Nikki's idea of that hyperlink. And are we in membership at all? I'm so sorry I got here a little bit late. I'm awfully sorry. Did we touch membership at all?
No, we're going in order.
Okay, so thank you. I would weigh in that way, those regards.
There's another hand.
Glenn, sorry, yes.
Yeah,
Glenn,
I just think that Joe pretty much hit it on the head. That, I mean, we know when we say borough president, we're talking about Brooklyn, and we know when we're talking about city planning, we're talking about New York, we're not talking about San Francisco city planning. I think the way that it was originally worded is fine, but to add that you could go to the city charter and the specific place to look is a good idea. So if anyone wants to go deeper into the weeds, they know exactly how to go about it. But we don't need to go into all of this detail. Okay, that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. I mean, I think we might benefit from adhering to the old adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if, other than certain stylistic, typographical adjustments we may want to make, maybe the only thing we really need to do to this section beyond that is just reference a specific part of the city charter that talks about all of the purposes for the community boards, and just adjust the last paragraph of that article to reflect that, and then hyperlink it. Maybe that's the wisest course of action here.
Does everybody have access to the chat too? Because there's a reference from Community Board 10 that Nikki posted.
Oh, in Manhattan. Let's see.
Sorry that it got like all garbled. I just looked at like a few community boards in a row, and they had one that looked similar to what we were talking about. And I'm a huge fan of plagiarism, so I thought we could look at it.
The only benefit to that, just for the sake of conversation, is that what they did is they highlighted all the other things that are usually implicated because the city has to respond to state law in a lot of those cases. And so having that acknowledgement there might be good for those who in the future may not know that, but at the same time, New York state law changes too. And it's up to the Community Assistance Unit, the mayor's office, the borough president to assist with that. So, you know, it's optional, but it could be helpful to acknowledge that we're particularly affected by open meetings law, and Freedom of Information Act and other things that other city agencies have to comply with too. It's an idea.
So that would be another purpose, or?
So Nikki, I'm guessing you found it under their purpose section in their bylaws?
Yeah, they don't even have a purpose section. They just have, like, before they start, it says preamble. Because I feel like it, which is essentially an intro. I was just saying, I thought what they did was a nice way to be a catch-all, right? And hit all of the different things, hyperlink it. And I think it was either Glenn or Joe who said, you know, if somebody wants to dig deeper, great, then they can click over to that other document and explore more what exactly that means.
So what's the text that is being proposed? Just because I don't have access to the chat, or at least not easily.
So, so the contents of it, just to summarize, is it references, in addition to the city charter, it's acknowledging that the community board is subject to New York state law, New York public officers law, Freedom of Information law, and New York state open meetings law. That's the gist of that blurb and what they've added. Again, I don't know. The only purpose in including that in the bylaws is simply to enshrine the fact that we should be as aware of that as we are of the city charter, which mentions these things in its own way, and some of it is just superseded by state law. But it wouldn't really belong in the purposes section.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. So, what's the consensus here on what change is really meaningful to make here to the purposes section? We have a lot of like the capitalization, typographical changes. Those are just sort of like editorial, corrections. In terms of a meaningful change, is the only one really adding somewhere in there consistent with New York City Charter 2800D and hyperlinking it so that people can look at the full list? Would that be fair to say that's the meaningful change that's being proposed here in the course of the conversation that we're having?
Subject to what anyone else says, I did have, I didn't line this up with the city charter, but I think I had like one additional proposal, and maybe it's captured by language in the charter that we could mirror if we wanted to include it. And that, was basically to refer to our monthly meetings, because that seems like a pretty important thing of what we do. So I just wrote off the cuff, provide a monthly public forum for district residents and others with issues of interest to the district to speak publicly before the board. So I don't know if there's something.
That happens to be 2800D3. At its discretion, hold public, private hearings or investigations with respect to any matter relating to the welfare of the district and its residents, but the board shall take action only at a meeting open to the public.
Okay.
And then there's another section under 12, another paragraph that says conduct public hearings and submit recommendations and priorities. And there's quite a few things like that scattered about. So your blurb might be a nice simplified summary of the gist of that, if we feel it's necessary to include. But that would be an addition, right? That's a full addition to the section, right?
Yeah, that would be an additional letter.
Glenn's hand is up, but if I could steal the prerogative of just inserting on this topic, the language about the purpose of the monthly board meeting seems a little bit broad, because it isn't necessarily a forum for people to come and share public comment. In fact, there are statements that limit public comment on, for instance, matters about which public hearings have been held, et cetera. And the public session is prescribed as a session for community and community. I forget the words. I read them once a month, every month. I can't remember. But for community, input. It's a community matters of community civic interest.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's it. But so I just want to be careful about whether or not you're changing the purpose of the monthly meeting. If so, we should be even more descriptive, and if not, we need to rein that in. And I'm sorry, Glenn. Thank you for letting me butt in.
You're always welcome to butt in, Sean. All right, two things. First of all, under the original one, number D says keep the public informed on matters relating to the welfare and development of the district. That's a catch-all that covers everything you're saying. So I don't see any reason for changing it. But the more important comment I'd like to make is we have 17 people participating here. And what you have not elucidated on is the mechanisms by which we agree to some level of consensus on any and all changes. Right? So far, it's just basically the two of you talking it out a little bit and sort of coming up with an idea. But what about the other 15 of us? How do you know that anyone agrees with these changes?
Well, let's get through section 2, and then, we'll say, here's the proposal, and, if we don't reach consensus or don't reach agreement, we'll continue. But I think the idea was to see if there were any additions, and I think your point is well taken that maybe, the idea of adding another purpose for purposes of the monthly forum isn't needed because it's captured by D. So, like as Jonathan was saying before, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I'm fine with
that. I
it.
agree with, but my main point is we have not established a mechanism by which you can determine consensus on any change.
Glenn, I believe that if anybody wants to chime in and agree or disagree with what's being said or add to it, I felt like that was the forum. And if the co-chairs want to delineate it better or go through one by one, if you move on to another subject, we can call out the other members who are on the call and just ask one by one, do you have a comment? Do you have a comment? Do you have a comment? But I think people, everybody's a grown-up and can chime in and raise their hand. And if you can't figure out how to raise your hand, just unmute yourself and speak up like I always do.
Glenn, to your point, what we had agreed last time was we were going to go through this section by section. Because of the work that Steve and Nikki have done in advance and put proposals in writing, we're discussing some of their proposals first. So this is normal sort of flexible parliamentary procedure here. We have the motion, we have two people that have backed it. We're discussing those sets of changes. We're having the discussion about anything else people would like to add to the equation here of what we might consider changing. And the goal here is, after we've talked it out just now, is to form the consensus on the wording so we know exactly what changes we're going to agree to. I'm not suggesting we go through, should we capitalize or not capitalize certain letters. I think unless someone has a strong objection, which please by all means raise, we're going to avoid sort of going tit for tat on that particular aspect of it. But in terms of the substance of the changes, what I was just doing before was trying to get to that consensus. So that's why I'm saying, in reviewing the changes that have been discussed and proposed that we're looking at now, what of these do we wish to keep? And that's where we're trying to get to the consensus of. So the main concerns seem to be clarifying that the purposes are derived from New York City Charter 2800D. I think that sounds like we have consensus. That's on the table to be explicit about that and to hyperlink it on the electronic versions of this. And that the other changes are mostly editorial correction in terms of just adjusting capitalizations. And in terms of anything else that anyone would like to be explicit about, let's go ahead and put that on the table now so we could formally include it in the consensus of changes to the section. So change 1, be explicit about where in the charter and hyperlink to that section of the charter to look at the full set of purposes for the community board. Make a bunch of those little tiny changes to the wording and spelling and capitalizations. And that's what I'm thinking the consensus is for this section. Does anyone else wish to modify what that consensus is and have something else included?
Well, I think there was the suggestion by both Glenn and, sorry, not Glenn, Carl and Ann regarding 2B. So we, in this markup, we referenced elected officials, and then there was a discussion of whether we need to include third parties, which I haven't included with the markup because I wasn't sure exactly how to frame that. So I think that's one of the only real substantive modifications that's been proposed, aside from the reference to the 2800D.
And Joe and Glenn all have hands up. I would just suggest that third parties become, the words be something more like community entities.
Or other interested
Okay.
community entities or parties, or other interested community that you want to.
You don't have to be interested for me to go after them.
Anyway.
I just worry a little bit about, because Carl had mentioned private sector entities, and that's not necessarily within, I mean, I get questions sometimes about private sector stuff that we really don't have say in. So you know, we're a city agency.
Yeah, we're not a private consulting company for a business, right? Anne, sorry, go ahead if you have something.
Yes, thank you. So I like Sean's a reminder to pull us back toward the civic side. I don't see why under A, the purpose is fine. You know, that's fine. I have no issue with the purpose as stated there, hyperlinking to the city charter. I think that's absolutely appropriate and should be superior. But when we go to set the clause for A, I would remove Brooklyn, and because it says already above that this is the bylaws for Brooklyn Community Board 14, and it'll say amended, correct? So I'm referring to the older document. So that sort of is the umbrella under which all of these are stipulated. So I would look to eliminate some of that extraneous language, as Joe and Glenn mentioned. But and Maureen, go back to Sean's point about the civic, so that, and there was something in here, I think on one of the changes, I can't change this document, what's shown on the screen. But it said something about the City Planning Commission and some other agency or other agencies. The language that was, isn't that really part of who we report out to in the event that we have advisory thoughts to share on a given consideration, or what the charter requires. So I think that the City Planning Commission and all city agencies, I think that the board manager can determine who should get them in collaboration with the board chair. So I think that we're sort of getting a little bit constrained perhaps in some of these specifics. So there's a need to update it, but where it says assist New York City and New York State department and agencies in making contact with, we could truncate that. We're not really, there's language here that is going beyond, I guess, is my concern. And I stuck in on a chat something about in terms of process, when we're jumping around from A to B to C to D and so forth, why don't we close out A, we can do a tally of hands, get a rough count, move on to B, move on to C, and actually make progress instead of a lot of this back and forth. I guess I'm looking at the clock and I'm concerned that we're going to extend beyond where members may be comfortable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just clarify, Anne? I just wanted, I'm just trying to understand if you're making any firm suggestion for changing B or C, or are you suggesting not including something in particular?
So for A, I would remove the word Brooklyn Community District 14. We're known as Community Board, right? So we are creating the bylaws for Brooklyn.
No, district is correct in this context. It's
Yeah.
the district. You are the board. The people are the board, and the board considers the needs of the district.
Okay, all right. So in terms of B, I would drop Brooklyn Borough President. We don't report to any other borough president. So I think it's already baked in that cake, right? So I would do that. Leave the city, New York City Planning Commission, but why do we have to say the New York City, the New York, just City Planning Commission is how it was written. And I think that most people would interpret that to be New York City, right? So city being capitalized. So I would remove that. I like the local elected officials. As far as I'm questioning the difference between departments and agencies. Are they more city departments or city agencies?
They're different ones are called different things and are referred to differently. So I think it's fine to leave them both there.
So run them together. Okay. All right. And public entities or civic, I leave that up to you. I think that it's public entities have the option to speak at the committee meetings, right? And they can return and present on behalf of their entity, unless they're a for-profit business, right? Generally speaking.
And there are some, Steve, I know you can't see the comments, so I'm just going to chime in that there are Deborah Valentin and Dawn Marie Walker have chimed in on this. And so community partners was one suggestion, community organizations and community entities are all suggested. I do like the idea of community over public, just because we do interact with community-based CBOs in the nonprofit sector. So we've got the public, the private, and the independent sector. So that's it.
Okay. Entities seems broader than organizations, but I'm kind of indifferent.
The only thing that's comparable there to this in the city charter is that we are to conduct substantial public outreach, including identifying the organizations active in the community district, yada, 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 about the mailing list. So nothing terribly important that way. But there is a reference of like public outreach, including organizations active in the community district, or advise community organizations in the community. I mean, we could use that wording if we're looking for something that comes right out of the city charter.
I'm fine with that. It's a little bit of a topic near and dear to me because of the nonprofit roundtable and how important I think it was when we started that to put those human service piece of the puzzle together with the more community service delivery work we do. So that's why I'm a little bit, maybe tripping up a little bit too much.
So what's the suggestion in terms of language, so I can reflect it?
May I just, maybe I would just propose saying, and organizations active in the community district.
Okay. Community organizations? Community organizations, or?
We could just say organizations active in the community district, because that's coming right out of the city charter, that particular phrase.
Thanks. Joe?
Hi, this is Joe Dweck. I'm back to the same square that I started in. What I'm trying to say is the less we say, I think the better, because if as you do your specifications and as other folks do, you're in danger of leaving people out. Just say the simplest amount, as we said, as per city charter, end of story. That way you don't have to enumerate every agency, nonprofit, and say no, that you can't say anything about political. Just leave it alone and keep it quick.
Okay, Joe, what I want to consider doing at this very moment, and I think this will help set the tone for what we do going forward, is because there were holistic changes to the section, let's just clarify what the holistic changes are so we could all see it. And then we could vote on it to adopt the changes there or to amend it, let's say, as you might suggest, which is to just give it a one-liner referencing the city charter and be done with it. But I think the issue is we're just trying to wrangle all the different proposed changes to the initial set of proposed changes so we could just see something coherent and then we could vote on it. So hold that thought. Let's just get the rest of this sort of squared away and then we could dispose of one way or the other, which way we should go with in terms of moving forward. That
All
sounds
right,
good.
that sounds good, and I think that's worth considering. Does anyone else have their hand up?
I think Joe was the only one I saw.
Okay,
So,
so then I think we've gotten through this. So unless if anyone else has any other comments, or I basically, you know, I'm fine deferring to the what seems to be the consensus. We don't need to say Brooklyn. We don't need to say New York City. In fact, I'll take out Brooklyn community. I guess Brooklyn. So it's just community district because someone said that. It's the lawyer in me that likes precise language, but if everyone agrees that it's implied and there's not going to be any confusion, which I agree with.
I don't mind having it in because there is a District 14 in Manhattan and in Queens as well.
sure.
I
agree.
Okay, I'll put it back.
I agree, Sean.
I'll put it back in that instance, but
I
otherwise.
hate when we get confused with CB14 Queens. It's a pain.
I agree too.
When I was on staff, that happened a lot.
Okay, but with that being said, I think we have, you know, markups for A through E. So if we wanted to decide between going with as it's currently marked up or Joe's suggestion,
So,
how do we want to go about this, Jonathan?
so just one little technical thing. I think you have the city charter reference twice in there. I don't know if you want to leave it at the top or if you want to leave it at the last paragraph.
Okay, so you think putting it up at the top because you were saying to include it in E, so I wasn't sure if you wanted
Well,
it twice.
yeah, just I think since I would leave it in E, and I would just take it out of the top, remove what you added to the top of that section, just because it's already entailed by what was happening in paragraph E, and I think that just because basically we're making now the minimal set of changes for the sake of clarification. I think that'll probably be best. So here's, I think, unless anyone else has anything they want to add to this at this moment, I'm just going to read the collective set of revisions quickly, and then we can decide if we want to go ahead with it or if anyone wants to make a motion to change something. So the purposes of the board, capital B, shall be to consider the needs of Brooklyn Community District 14, the district, and develop plans for the district's welfare and orderly development. B, advise the borough president, city planning commission, local elected officials, city departments or agencies, and community organizations active in the district with respect to any matter relating to the welfare of the capital B district and its residents. Assist city departments and agencies in making contact with and transmitting information to the people of the district. Can you scroll down there? Yep. Keep the public informed on matters relating to the welfare and development of the district. Such other purposes as set forth in the New York City Charter, Section 2800D, or in New York State law. So that's, I think, the official proposal now that we're putting before the committee to review. So any discussion about this set of proposed changes? Let's see if any hands raised. Okay, it looks like there were no hands raised.
I mean, Joe, are you still in favor of what you've said twice now in terms of condensing it down to one sentence and just referring to the charter?
Let's see, is Joe still here? He's still on mute.
I apologize for being technically challenged. Yes,
okay.
in fact, I wanted to, yes, the answer is yes, as minimally as possible. In fact, I wanted to put the citation of city charter up at the top so that it is clear that we are operating under it. I don't know if you fellows are really aware, if everybody's aware of our advisory role, that we're really powerless, with all due respect. We really are powerless. And I've been to the city agencies that overrule us, like whether it be DCAS, whether it be standards and appeals, and we're zero. We really are. I don't want to think that we're so important that this is going to be the Bill of Rights. It's not. So it's just to try to make it minimalist and that's really my best thing. I didn't want to try to, as I said before, I get into the weeds, or somebody else said it before, excuse me, but thank you, yes.
Yeah, I kind of second Joe's view. I think rather than if things have been spelled out in the charter, I don't necessarily think we need to pick and choose what to highlight. I think it's fine to just say, hey, the purposes of the board are consistent with what is spelled out in charter section, what have you, and keep going. So that's my thought.
Nikki has her hand up. I mean, we're only going to be taken as seriously as we take ourselves, though. So I think it is important to assert our, the important role we do play in terms of advisory. I keep doing this. I say who has a hand up, and then I talk. I'm sorry. I'm going to try to not do that. He has a hand up.
But I just want to say I agree with you, Sean. And community boards are as powerful or as powerless as their collective membership wishes to be. And we've seen many powerful community boards throughout the history of community boards in New York City. And we've seen many very quiet community boards. Yeah. And it really is up to the membership. It's up to us to decide what kind of community board we want to be and let the political consequences fall where they may in the course of that. But to your point, I agree with you, Sean. Nikki, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. I had to add that part.
No, and I agree with you guys. I mean, so here's the thing, 2 points. When I look at other community board bylaws, right, like this purposes section is really just sort of an introduction to the rest of the bylaws. So I actually happen to think same thing, like could just link to the city charter. But what I wanted to say about, I don't want to get into I wouldn't be on the community board if I thought that we were powerless, right? That wouldn't be a great use of time. But I do think, let's think about how does this document actually get used? When we had our first meeting, I said, Sean, is this a document we have to file with the city? Are they going to review it and say, no, your bylaws are bad? And you said, no. What is the most important thing about this document? When you join the community board, this is the very first thing you're probably going to read. And so the very beginning of this document should speak to something that someone who's going to be on this board needs to know about Community Board 14 in a hyper-local way. Like, why do we exist? What's our culture? So I think maybe in terms of editing this whole document, just approaching it from that sense. The most important thing about this document is it is a reflection of our organizational culture. It's not a super binding legal document where we need to hash out the, all of that. But let's think of this as, what do you want people who are on this board to know about the rules of being a good member? And maybe that can help us really figure out what's important to discuss and maybe not as important to discuss. So stop approaching it like lawyers and approach it as, this is the first thing that a new member of this board would lead. And this is what governs our culture. Also, when things go wrong, if someone's misbehaving, right? And maybe think about prioritizing edits in that way.
Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Here's what I think I'd like to propose, since I don't see any hands up at this moment, is why there is more or less a technical motion to just replace all the changes we've just discussed, and with a simple line that says the purpose of the board shall be in accordance with New York City Charter Section 2800D. Why don't we see what everybody's feelings are, whether that's the only thing we want to say, or, and if that's not the case, if we don't want to just simplify it and leave it at that, then we could consider these changes that we've been discussing and see if this is the version we want to go. Because what I would like to do is treat what Joe's suggestion was, and it sounds like, Steve, that you also sort of second the consideration of it, is to replace all these changes we're talking about with a one-liner that says what I just said. The purposes of the board shall be in accordance with New York City Charter, Section 2800D. So maybe we just see what everybody's feelings are about that, and then take it from there.
If anyone else wants to speak up,
Sean.
Sean.
May I just say, it sounds like, just to sort of piggyback off of what Nikki was saying, and correct me if I heard you wrong, but it sounds like the purposes should sort of be boiled down to a mission statement. Not a delineation of every purpose, but basically the mission statement of the board.
Right, and I'm actually trying to stick with Nicole's, with Nikki's, I'm trying to leave space for that, but just because the tension is between those two options, I want to see if everybody else who's on the committee, if there's a majority consensus for just one-liner versus something that looks more like the mission statement version that we already have, and the one I think that Nikki and what you're saying, you know, in other words, keeping the version that is more of like that clarifying mission statement. So I think I'm sensing that there are two versions here, and I think we need to kind of boil it down to one at this point. So again, why don't we do that? Steve, would you be in agreement for us to figure out which direction most of us want to go on this right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think Nikki's points are well taken in terms of, you know, that I think that is a good justification for, you know, deciding to spell out some purposes. And again, you know, I wasn't here, but you know, you and various others that were here, you know, went through this and decided to include those purposes the last time this was done. So, you know, I'm more than willing to defer on that point that, you know, let's continue to do that. So,
and those have probably been there since the 80s.
Right.
Really?
That section's been there
longer.
Yeah.
So Deborah, Edward, Edson, Joanne also echoed or supported Nikki's points, just from the chat.
Okay, so is everybody okay with doing a raise hand, or is it just better to put it in the chat? Is anybody just on a phone version of this, a phone call version of this meeting, where we wouldn't be able to see?
Okay, I jump in here.
Go ahead, Glenn.
The reason we have A through E is primarily to Nikki's point. That is that anybody who picks this up, just reading that, the way it was written, and now the way it is written, I have no problem with these relatively minor changes, so that someone could get a pretty good idea of what it is we do. Everything we did about making the changes, however many years ago it was exactly to state what it is we actually do. Now, adding that if you want to go deeper, you can go to section so-and-so, I think that's a great idea. But to have it as a one-liner tells nobody anything except that you have to do more work. You got to go somewhere else and read a very complicated legal type document, which most people are not going to do. So my vote right now is simply to accept it the way it is, and let's move on. Thank you.
Okay, so it sounds like we have, I'm going to try to shorthand this, but it sounds like from Nikki's perspective, it sounds like, I think from, I don't want to, I'm trying to do this intelligently with all these different ways. Okay, Joanne, it sounds like is in favor of keeping the longer version. It looks like, obviously, Glenn Rowland is in favor of the longer version. Anybody else want to speak? Let's see. Oh, Deborah, you want to go ahead?
I just wanted to agree.
Okay, with the longer version or the shorter version?
The longer version, because it tends to explain what's actually we're doing.
Okay. Okay.
Hello. Good night. Hello.
What is the longer?
Florencia.
Yes.
John, you have to be specific. What is the longer version?
The
one
longer
that
version, I'm sorry, the longer version is, yes, Glenn, I agree. The longer version is a version we're currently looking at on the screen, the one with A through E.
Okay, thank you.
Versus the one-liner that just references the charter.
Yeah, okay, yes, this is perfect.
And Florencia was about to speak.
Yes, unfortunately, I'm actually on the road. Sorry about, but I agree with I'm only hearing because I can't look. So the version that I think Glenn is speaking about, with the suggestion that was made to put in the hyperlink and to quote the exact section. That's what I'm agreeing with.
Okay, so the version that you've been working on, not the one-liner.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, thank you, Florencia. I think Ed is, Ed Sen?
Count me in for the longer version.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak on it? Because
Carl Henry has indicated in the chat that he's in favor of the longer version.
okay. So it sounds, I don't want to be presumptuous. This is not a formal vote at the moment, but it does sound like we have a consensus to keep what we have with the changes we proposed and not substitute it with a one-liner that references the New York City Charter section, and then that's it. If that sounds fair and accurate to everybody, then I think we're going to move on to consider what is in front of us and make sure we're good to go to the next section. So are we okay with what we have proposed here on, I just want to make sure there's no objections other than the ones that have already been stated. Hearing none. And minus any typos, we will propose section Article 2 purposes as it is currently written here. And I think it's safe to say we can move on to Article 3.
Okay.
Let's do it.
So let's tackle 3A first, which is membership. Here, so let me back up and let's look at the original. Okay. So 3A basically spells out what's in the pursuant to section 2800 of the city charter. There's no link. If we can look at that. This board shall consist of the district council members elected from any area, blah, blah, blah. So it's a lot of mirroring language from the city charter about how members are elected and appointments and that sort of thing, and not more than 25% of such appointment shall be city employees. So I think it's been proposed that we basically refer to the city charter there. So it's kind of a similar issue to what we were just talking about. So my markup based on comments that had been given to that effect, which I thought made sense, especially because the city charter was recently amended. I'm not sure if it had really impacted anything that was here, but basically just saying membership of the board will be consistent with section 2800 of the New York City Charter and leaving it at that. So coming out basically the opposite of where we just came out on purposes, but open to discussion, and folks want to basically leave it the way it was, which I don't think anything that was there got changed in the most recent city charter revisions. That's certainly an option as well.
Ed Sen and Glenn Woolen have hands up.
Steve, I'm in favor of your suggestion of keeping that, but I do have two proposals to add to that. One being that the state legislature did pass a change in 2014 regarding the age of community board members, and that was lowered to the age of 16, which is not reflected on the city charter.
All right, so what should be referenced there? And the New York State what?
I just got to jump in here because I'm looking at the official version online from the city. There is a line in the current version that does say no more than 2 members shall be less than 18 years of age. Now, I don't know the full story of that particular phrasing, because I do remember that they made it possible for under 18 board members to be appointed. I didn't recall the limit to 2. But
I don't recall that either, Jonathan. This is news to me, but I know that there was a change in 2016 regarding the age. Just wanted to bring that. How we want to divide that up, I'm happy with, but I just want to call attention to that. And my second proposal, and this can be item C, is just making sure that we as a community board include a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement within our bylaws, which the charter does not reference at all as well. So I'm happy to take that up as a later part of the conversation in terms of how we want to phrase that in that statement that we draft up. But I just want to bring that to the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. I do want to bring up, again, I'm looking at the one that's live on this amlegal.com website. That's a direct link from the city, nyc.gov. There is a section here that says the borough president, because remember, we don't have any say on membership. The borough president shall seek out persons of diverse backgrounds, including with regard to race, ethnicity, gender, age, disability status, sexual orientation, language, and other characteristics the borough president deems relevant to promoting diversity and inclusion of underrepresented groups and communities within community boards. So there is a section in the card. This may have all come from 2019, so that may be why other versions of this may not have reflected it yet, but it does seem to be in there at this moment. I just want to highlight that, and that might be a more recent update to the official record. So anyway, we can discuss.
Can you share that link in the chat? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to try to do that. I'm on my phone. I'm going to add it on my computer. Let me see what I can do. But in the meantime, great.
Just
Thank you.
sorry, Ed, if you could just say what was the New York State reference that because I wanted to just jot
The
it
state
down.
legislature passed in 2014, just lowering the age limit from 18 to 16. Per Jonathan's note, I don't know if there are any other preclusions to that, whether it's just only 2 members or in general.
All right, that's fine.
That's how Carl Henry got appointed, because I referred to him in Borough Hall as a young applicant, and she thought I meant a high school student. And so that was just an aside.
Well, you know, the shaved head does take off, 17 years. So I'm with it.
I just shared the link in the chat.
Does anyone else have their hand up?
I do.
Go, Glenn.
Again, I don't see any reason for all these changes. The idea is that anyone who picks up this document should be able to figure out what we're doing and not send them someplace else and make this a serious homework assignment. Let them know where they could go if they want further information is fine. And it does say that, section 2800. But you crossed out everything that explains what our membership comes from. I don't agree with that. I think, let me make this more general so you know how I'm going to respond to everything. I think this document, as it stands, is pretty good. The only areas that we really need to look at is anything to do with the pandemic and Zoom meetings that we might be able to utilize in the future, even when 80% of the population is vaccinated. There are some areas that we really should make some changes because the world has changed a little. But all the rest of this is pretty good. You want to add a line here or there? Okay. But major changes make no sense to me. Thank you.
I believe that some of these changes came from the conversation in a couple of previous meetings that the bylaw should reflect the actions that the board is responsible for. And since membership, we don't appoint our own members, that this may be made it look as though the members have say in membership. So I think the inclusive language that Jonathan read sounds very valuable. And so maybe the membership could be that the community board is in support of, inclusivity in its membership and shall support the borough president in efforts to appoint members according to section 2800 of the city charter or something. But I don't know. I don't want the board to look responsible for things that the board has no say in. And I think that's where the strike through came from. A conversation of that.
Thanks, Sean. Any other hands, Jonathan?
There are Anne, Deborah, Ed, and Joe.
And
Okay, I would go.
Okay.
I think with the statement that Jonathan read, I think that needs to be included because we want to be more inclusive and we want to be more transparent. So putting that in, if somebody come and they read it, they will get a good understanding of where we stand in regards to membership. my thought.
And I like that point, Deborah, because I think to Nikki's point, I think we're going to have to call it the Nikki Levinson Angulo rule, which is the point. I really do, because I think it was a really smart point. That I agree with Glenn that most of this is probably okay with the bylaws. There are certain things we could clarify, clean up. That's good. We should do that. But to Nikki's point, that this is like the shorthand manual for the new members or for anyone serious about applying. And it should encapsulate the most important things to understand about what it is to be on a community board, what our community board in particular wants to highlight about how we see our role in the community and in city government. And it should encapsulate that succinctly for everyone to digest, so they get the point quickly. And of course, they can always click a hyperlink to the relevant details, right? The fine print, as it were. I think so. I'd like to invoke the Nikki rule here, that probably what we have is good. We shouldn't remove so much that a person looking at our bylaws doesn't know how people become members of the board easily. I do think we should include that there. I like the idea of the diversity and inclusion statement. But I think the Nikki rule applies here. I'm calling it the Nikki rule now. Is that all right, Nikki? I guess so.
It's completely fine with me as long as there's no one else being like, I hate the Nikki rule.
So if I'm understanding correctly, is the idea that we basically go back to the original framework and include a diversity and equity statement along that?
And then a link to the section of the charter with the additional details about membership.
I can switch over to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think
that's the way we're leaning.
I think that's the way that it seems we're leaning. But of course, we have other hands. So Anne, I think you're next, and then Joe, I think. Anne, I guess Anne is.
Can you hear me or no?
Yep. Nope, we can hear you now. Okay.
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm hitting buttons wrong. Please forgive me. I think Dawn and Ed brought in some really important things, as did Glenn. I tend to lean that the document needs a little bit of tightening up to bring it forward to where we actually are. But if it doesn't speak, if it just refers back to the city charter section, so forth, why would anyone want to participate on the board? And further, in the chat, which I don't think some of you are able to see, I see some additional comments, but we are not an elected body, we are appointed, right? One way or the other, we're appointed. So I think we should consider changing the word elected from membership A. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne.
It's district council members elected. So it's talking, right. It's a little confusing the way it's worded, but it's city council members who represent any part of our district.
Yeah,
right. They're board members ex officio.
That's right.
That's what that's referring to.
Then perhaps it should indicate that the elected members appointees, right? Because to Sean's point, that's how we are on the board, is that we are appointed by somebody. We don't run for office, and we're volunteers. So
I agree with your point, Ann. I do find that wording confusing. I think what we should do is reflect the wording on that part of the city charter, which says that the board members are appointed by the borough president first, and then it references that the council members elected from within our district are ex officio members.
The language that I've seen elsewhere, it's a little more straightforward. It says that the members of the board are appointed by the borough president, half of whom are nominated by city council members whose districts overlap with the community district in proportions identified, I think, by city planning.
And then the fact that
leave that last part out, that members are appointed by the borough president, half of whom are nominated from their corresponding council member.
And the fact that
sounds clearer. Thank you.
That is much clearer. I like that.
I'm still stunned though that Anne wanted to join the community board because she was so riveted by our bylaws. She read the bylaws and then just could not stop herself. That's awesome.
So I guess the way, I mean, I think this discussion shows that the beginning of this sentence is confusing because it's referring to the council members serving, I guess, ex officio or whatever the right term is.
I'm sorry, they call it non-voting members. Non-voting members. That's what they.
So I'm wondering if we should just make that part its own sentence somewhere else, or just because like I think we all kind of saw that the way it was worded and like got confused. So I wonder if we should start with 50 not more than 50 persons, and then in the next sentence or some later sentence say also on the board and as non-voting members are the council members from any area, which includes any part of the district.
Yeah, I like that, and I think that's a meaningful, important change to the language. I personally think you could all disagree, but I think that would be helpful because I even had to read that a couple of times over. Like, how did this get in here? Okay, so let's see, who do we got? I think Joe is next, unless I'm missing somebody. I don't know. I'm trying to judge that.
Thank you, Jonathan, Stephen. Just that that quotation of or inclusion of an inclusionary clause gives people the thinking that we are the people doing the appointing. We have nothing to do with it. So I think that it would be misleading to say that's how the board is, as it said previously. It's we're appointed by the different electeds. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who has their hand up on this section? I see some hands up from before. I don't know if that means you see.
Yeah, Deborah's hand is still.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I missed it. Deborah, sorry. Go ahead.
Should I mute?
She's on mute still. She might be trying to get herself off of mute. Or, okay. Oh, hand is down. Okay, good. Okay. All right. Okay, so it seems to me that we may have to make sure we write the section correctly. So we can do that now. There is a possibility we could say, let's get the wording right and then bring it back for quick review next time. Or do we just handle getting this section right now, knowing that we want to aim for an 8:30 conclusion, ideally, for this meeting tonight?
I guess one thought I have is if we do want to work in the diversity and equity point, if we should include it in making such appointments, the borough president shall give due regard to representation for each neighborhood within such district. So at least that addresses Joe's concern that like we don't have, that's not something for us to concern about. We make it direct that's under the purview of the borough president.
Yeah, which we have to put it's the borough president. We have to, because it also should be very clear here, as it is in the beginning, the borough president is the one doing all the appointing. So we should make it clear, though, to people who wonder, maybe is the board diverse enough in certain ways to know that, well, make sure you are talking to the borough president's office. And there is a wonderful line here that I don't remember seeing before, but it's at the very end, which says, I never saw this before, community boards, civic groups, and other community groups and neighborhood associations may submit nominations to the borough president and to council members. I don't remember seeing it before. It may have been there all along and I missed it, but even the notion that community boards can say, hey, we want to nominate so-and-so or these groups of people because they're not represented adequately on our board, that is something that apparently the city charter is saying we may do. So that's a very interesting point. Again, for those of you who are particularly interested in this part of it, I'm just going to say that. That's all. Any other hands up? So do you want to grab that language, Steve, to copy and paste it in, or do you feel like we need to give that more careful massaging before we do that?
I am more than happy to put in that language. Hold on.
I think
then
it could
maybe
be
the-
simply handled by putting the community board is in support of the borough president's efforts or the borough president's mandate or whatever it is. To just to express support.
It's not a bad idea.
Do we want to frame it that way?
Maybe we'll defer
I
to
guess,
Ed Sen. Oh, sorry.
yeah.
Since he brought it up in particular.
Yeah, I think acknowledging it and how Sean framed it, I think that would work for me.
Let's give Steve a chance to.
So it's a little hard for me to copy and paste anything. So do you mind just dictating something? I'm sorry to make you do that.
Sean, your wording seemed to be popular. What did you say again?
I was about to type it out, now I've got it. The borough president.
Yep.
I don't know if you want to keep the pursuant to. The borough president shall appoint not more than 50 persons who have a residence, business, professional, or other significant interest in the district, half of whom are nominated by overlapping city council, by city council members who overlap with the district in a proportion dictated by city planning.
I'm fine cutting it off at overlap with the district unless there's
Okay.
any objections.
And then I think then there was going to be a question, city council members whose district overlaps with the community district serve as ex officio non-voting members of the board.
Okay. Great.
Okay. Is there any other language we have to?
Oh, what about the diversity and equity language? I thought you had
Oh,
mentioned
yeah,
it
yeah,
before,
Sean,
Jonathan.
your wording on that seemed to be well liked.
The community board is in support of, and then Ed, do you want to reiterate the language?
Maybe like the city charters mandate for something to that effect, like
Diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, Jonathan, you were the one who read it. The version of the charter that I was looking at didn't actually have that, so I'm still trying to pull that up.
And if I might jump in here,
Sure.
we want to be
Again,
careful.
we're just drafting the language so we could discuss the language, just so you know. Just to be clear.
What Jonathan read means that the community board is now responsible for, if we put that language in, making sure for diversity, just in case the borough president and the other electeds do not supply it for us. And I wish to be careful about that language because we have never taken a proactive role in making suggestions to the borough president about who should be put on the board. So we should not be put in language that we're responsible for something we don't do. Thank you.
I agree.
Thank you, Glenn.
So should we say the borough president is responsible for ensuring compliance with the city charter's mandate? Something like that?
Let's see here, because let's be very, to their point, we got to be a little bit more careful with that wording. The board supports the city charter's mandate that the borough president seek out persons of diverse backgrounds to promote diversity and inclusion on community boards.
Seek out persons with diverse backgrounds to, what was that?
Promote diversity and inclusion within community boards.
Well, within our community board, right? You know, we don't care about the whole city, but within our community.
I think just saying diversity, promote diversity inclusion is fine. So we want to frame it as the board supports.
That's the main
That's a
question.
good
That is
idea.
the main question.
Okay.
I don't know if we have any hands up. Sorry, I missed.
I
Glenn,
have,
you just. Oh yeah.
His hand just went up.
Glenn, were you first?
I'm finished, thank you.
So I think like the anxiety around what we're responsible for, I would just suggest first sentence, say pursuant to section 2800 of the city charter, community board members are appointed by the borough president. Period. The board should consist of, and then go through everything else. And that way, like you cannot miss that point, right? And everything else that follows, you know, that will have been clear. I strongly support putting that sentence in there about, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Again, approaching this document as sort of a signal to new members and saying something about our culture. And I guess my question is like, I know the borough president is the one that says, yes, you can be the board member, but I feel like, you know, and I say this as a compliment, like Sean, you have a say in perhaps like suggesting to a city council person, hey, this person is great. Like I know, you know, or I mean, it's not like Eric Adams is looking at applications with no context. And I do think our board is extraordinarily diverse. And that is a result of the board's culture. Like it's not magic that happens. Am I nuts? Feel like I'm trying to say something carefully that I.
Yeah, I mean, you're not nuts. You might be nuts, but what you just said isn't so nutty. Except that it also works the other way around. We have had board members appointed who on their application indicate they've never been to a board meeting. I don't know where they come from. I'm sometimes a little bit aghast and, you know, and disappointed that somebody who'd been volunteering with us for a while got, you know, passed over for somebody we'd never heard of who even clearly indicated in their application they haven't been to a meeting. And yet I've been pleasantly surprised by some of those members who then step up to the plate and become good members. But so it's not, I don't know. I don't know about the diversity of our board is almost proportionate to the diversity within our district if you're looking solely at demographic, at sort of ethnic cultural data. I don't know, we certainly don't match up, and I doubt we match up socioeconomically, and I don't know if we have, we don't match up in terms of gender identity, stuff like that. But you know, the ethnicity of our board pretty much reflects the ethnicity of the district.
No, and that's a good, thank you for the reminder, Sean, that diversity goes way beyond just people's ethnicity and race. So, but I get, apologizing for that aside, I guess it was really more just a question is like, going back to the power thing, are we that powerless in trying to form and advocate for diverse membership in our board? And my impression has always been that we're not. So my 2 cents, put the borough president in bold, if we want to, highlight it in yellow in the first sentence, and then definitely make a, you know, at least having a nod to the language around diversity, equity, inclusion that's in the city charter, I think is a good idea. And I thank Ed for proposing it.
Just to note, the word equity is not in the city charter, but diversity and inclusion is. Just a technical note there.
Can I make, well, does anyone else have a hands up?
Yes. Oh, Anne does, I think. Yes. Anne, do you have your hand up still or no?
Yeah, I do. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Now we can.
No, now you're on mute.
Okay, let me try that again. Is that better? Okay, thank you. So it doesn't matter to me if it's at the top or the bottom. I do support it being there. I would not like to see it buried in the middle, all right? And I don't think that it needs to have all of this. I think it could be a little more truncated and basically state that the borough president where is this language? In making such appointments, that we support that the diversity of the board reflect the diversity within the community, and put that in we support the borough president in his selections or encourage or something. But I wouldn't bury it in the middle. I'd put it at the top or the bottom.
My suggestion, because I was going to say, I don't know why, if we really need to make the prior sentence, in making such appointments, the borough president shall give due regard to representation for each neighborhood within such district. I don't know why that's a point we need to highlight. And obviously, this is our bylaws. We're not commanding the borough president to do anything. So my suggestion would be that doesn't need to be here. And I think the sentence after that, not more than 25% of such appointments shall be city employees. I don't know why we need to single out that fact either. So, I mean, at least from my standpoint, I'd be fine with cutting those two sentences, but I don't want to draw Glenn's ire, who tells me I'm too quick to slash things from here. So that's a suggestion.
Cutting things and making it more succinct is something I agree with.
Okay, thank you, Glenn.
That did not sound like ire.
No, it did not. Yeah, let's see. So what would that look like? What would we chop out if we did that?
So I'm proposing chopping out that sentence and chopping out this sentence. So basically we're highlighting, 50 members, who have a residence, business, professional, or significant interest, half of whom are nominated by council members. We support the city charter's mandate that the borough president seek out persons with diverse backgrounds to promote diversity and inclusion, or if we want to modify that to the extent that Ann just mentioned. And then the next sentence is, we'll mention the fact that city council members serve in an ex officio role. I don't know if I spelled ex officio correctly, but yeah.
Can we remove in addition city council members, just make it a statement? We don't, it's, people may not know, just in addition.
Okay.
And to your point, Ann, I sort of agree with you about where that diversity line goes. You're right. It shouldn't be buried in there.
So, but taking out that sentence, now it's the third sentence, because based on Nikki's suggestion that we have a very short first sentence.
No, that's fine.
Still buried though.
There's something.
Well, it's buried because we're looking at the red lines.
No, but also your council member one is going to be last. The council members from any area would be the last one.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
If you move that in the middle after how the regular board members get appointed, then that last sentence would probably stand out really powerfully.
So are you suggesting making that last?
The board supports should be the beginning of the last sentence.
Yes, that's correct. That's what I'm going for. Thanks, Sean.
You want to move it to the end?
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's
rather
correct.
than in the middle. Okay.
2 Fs in officio.
Correct.
2 Fs. Thank
Yes.
you. I was just going to Google that.
I think so.
No, it is. It is.
Is it? It looks weird to me. But...
And very nitpicky, but I would take the
Oh, yeah,
or,
you're right.
where it says borough president who have a residence or a business professional. No, it's fine. Never mind.
I might throw in an Oxford comma, but
50%. Yeah, I think the issue is that appointed by the borough president precedes it, and it would seem like it has to do with the borough president and not about the 50 persons. That's, I think, what the
it's like the dangling modifier problem, I guess.
Yeah.
Not more than 50 persons. Oh, so should we move whoever residents, or should we move appointed by a borough president after here to make it a little clearer?
Let me see. Consists of not more than 50 persons who have a residence or business professional district appointed by the 50 person. Either that or you just put a comma after persons and after president. That would probably serve the same function.
Well, you could strike out most of that sentence and just say board members are appointed by the borough presidents. More members shall consist of.
Yeah, I think because we deal with the
residence business. Yeah.
I think because we addressed the appointed by the borough president in the first sentence, consistent with Nikki's suggestion, we don't have to repeat it in the second sentence. I
No,
think it's,
so
we've
it
already
should be
established it.
membership shall consist of not more than 50 persons who have a residence, business, professional, or other significant interest in the district.
That's good.
Half of whom are nominated by council members who overlap the district. I think it works.
Okay. Once you finish the cleanup, let's see what the proposed
Yeah.
the completed change version, if that's the phrase. I forget the phrase.
So this is what it looks like after all the, no.
Okay, so
We got
I'll
all the changes.
okay, other than a space between board and the board,
Yep. Got it.
I'm gonna read it out for those who don't have a screen to look at in front of them. So this is what we're proposing for the Article 3 membership, Section A. Pursuant to Section 2800 of the City Charter, board members are appointed by the borough president. Membership shall consist of not more than 50 persons who have a residence or a business, professional, or other significant interest in the district, half of whom are nominated by council members who overlap with the district. Council members from any area which overlaps with the district shall serve as ex officio non-voting members of the board. The board supports the city charter's mandate that the borough president seek out persons with diverse backgrounds to promote diversity and inclusion. Okay, so that's the proposed set of changes to 3A. Any discussion, anything else further? Yeah, Anne, sorry, yes, your hand's up.
Yeah, I do, actually. So where it says nominated by council members who overlap with the district, I'd like to drill down on that a little bit. Half of whom are nominated by council members within, council members with city council members within the district, or with their constituencies within the district, something that drills further into that, because it's a little muddy almost. So I would change with to within, and who represent constituents or like you could have overlapping lines mapping, or I'm trying to think of the word here, but within the district, I definitely change it from with to within, and then indicate that there are more than one city council member. So I would put city council in front of city in front of council.
Okay.
Right. And then who with city council members
within the district respectively.
There you go.
How about who have constituents in our district?
I think the word respectively is how you denote that it attends to that member.
It ties it up neatly. Yeah. Thank you, Sean.
I think, Anne, the problem is that word overlap. It's sort of a little vague, and it might just be better stated a little clearer, like you're saying. It just says that have districts within that have areas within the district, or something like that.
I think that it sounds as though this committee has reached consensus on what they want this to say, and that then just perfecting the language is something that maybe we could do with fresher eyes. Maybe if Steve or Nikki want to take a look at it and bring it back to the next meeting cleaned up, without making any substantial changes to the meaning that you've reached consensus on, just sort of just neatening it up a little bit, but not maybe torturing it right now.
Because we're not proposing this to the board on at our meeting. This is a multi-meeting project.
Y'all got the meetings to go. This is not a short dance.
I'm okay with
it right now. Yeah.
I'm okay with that. You know, if certainly open to further discussion, but yeah, it does seem like we're okay with this framework, which is good.
So are we?
And,
I thought the
Andrew.
way, I thought the way Sean trimmed that out was fine. Because it allowed for their sections without being too verbose. The council members' sections within our district. So it tied it up neatly. I don't recall the language.
I think the language that I see written in front of me encapsulates it beautifully. I think it's time to agree to this and move on to the next section.
Any objections? All right.
Yeah, there's no substantial changes
Okay.
to this. I think we're good. I just want to give everyone a chance. Is just to make sure that there are no substantial changes anyone wishes to make to that section as we've proposed amending it. Give it a
Go back
couple
to
of seconds.
the new frame, please. This is the old. Go back to the in black, please. What's where we are? Thank you. Yeah, I just want to see the last sentence.
Yep, sorry.
There we are. All right. So city charters mandate. That looks good. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay,
all right.
hearing
So,
no further comment, we should move on to the next section.
okay. So next is B1. I think we'll start there. So I guess so this is the what it was. Members of the community board appointed by the borough president shall serve for staggered terms of 2 years, 1/2 of the membership being renewed each year. Then we jump right into removal, which I remember struck me as odd. I think so. This was the original. So let me see what markup was. Oh, I guess I was proposing linking it up with the charter first of all, and then saying, because now we have term limits, I believe, reflected in the charter, so I wanted to capture that and basically move the removal into a following section, just because it seemed like a weird way to start the terms and renewal section by in the second sentence of the first subparagraph to jump right into removal. Open thoughts.
I mean, if you're going to say term limits apply, if we're going to reference the term limits, I think we should probably spell them out. Otherwise, basically just referencing the section where this all comes from might be sufficient.
Yeah, I just thought it seemed complicated, but maybe there's an easy way to spell it out. Again, I didn't directly reference the city charter while I was doing this, so I'm open to, cleaning up that language if we agree that a reference to term limits should be included here.
Well, but the term limits are sort of, I don't know if you can clarify them because they're complicated term limits, right? You get eight, what is it? 8 years, and then you have to take a year off, but then you can get reappointed after
Right.
you've now been, after you've reached your term limit, you just have to take a break. And then I'm not even sure, do you get another 8 years or do you, so
Yes.
it should say term limits apply consistent with the inconsistency of the city charter. Otherwise, I might leave that one alone. That's a hornet's nest.
Reference the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Sean, that sounded like a sentence from the Ministry of Silly Walks. Better watch yourself.
So do we think we should reference term limits? I think we should at least, reference them, at least
Subject
generally.
to term limits as specified in the city charter.
Yeah, that's fine. Demonstrating our awareness is a good thing.
Okay. Any other discussion regarding B1?
So,
Okay.
excuse
Any
me.
hands?
Are you saying that that's all that's going to be in B1, that you want to go to relabel to say B2 all the ways that people can be taken off the board. Just separate
Correct.
those two, right?
Yeah, I think that belongs, if we're talking about terms of renewal, let's start with terms of renewal and then
Okay.
the next thing. I gathered from what Jonathan had said that there was, I guess, issues where the removal issue needed to be highlighted, and maybe at some point. I think I understand the origin, but just, looking at it fresh, I think, yeah, pushing it down makes sense.
Okay, so just to clarify this point, the city charter provides for this. Section 2800B says, an appointed member may be removed from a community board for cause, which shall include substantial non-attendance at board or committee meetings over a period of 6 months, by the borough president or by a majority vote of the community board. So that's in the city charter, that's already true. I believe the origin of this particular wording here is that we, at some point, were going to attempt to enforce this, and there was a desire to clarify the process by which we would do this to the as a community board to recommend the removal. And what I can tell you is anything related to notification and letters for non-attendance, that has basically not happened in any sort of enforcement context in probably the almost 20 years that I've been a part of the board.
I know Sean and Ed started doing that. Once we realized it was there were letters that I got a letter at one point.
It got harder with the remote meeting, sort of like ensuring that we had good attendance. I mean, we have done it intermittently. We haven't done it consistently. I mean, Alvin and I went through a phase, and really, it seems that when we would alert somebody to the fact that they had missed a couple board meetings, there was usually an acceptable reason for that just hadn't been communicated. I don't know that it really became an extremely useful mechanism. And I also know that, we are, I've never been at one of our meetings where we didn't have quorum. Never, ever, ever, not once. So, yeah, I don't know if I'm just trying to get out of doing warning letter work, but I wonder if we can leave it in there, and then the board can direct the district manager and the chair to be more diligent about getting letters out, consistent with this, or we can make it more general so that it can be, the chairperson shall send a warning letter to any board member that has, and not name the number, that has had sort of an unreasonable number of absences. I don't know. Or make us do it.
I just want to point out that the warning letter is currently in the next section, so I'm wondering if we just want to, at least for the time being, just make sure we're okay with B2 before we move on to the warning letter issue.
So, okay, sorry, Steve.
Yeah, I think the main point here, the most useful thing to just evaluate, and I don't think this should be an issue here, is that whenever the board is going to propose removing someone from the board for cause, that it has to happen after a recommendation for removal by the executive committee. I think that's the most meaningful part here, because that's not in the city charter, how we would do it. It's just that we have the ability to do it by majority vote. This is just defining the process that a recommendation from the executive committee has to precede a vote of removal of a board member from the community board.
So then should I cut B consistent with 2800B then, Jonathan, if that's an extra step in our
that's an extra step. Yeah, so
okay.
that part about the majority vote following a recommendation for removal by the executive committee, that's the part that's not in 2800B.
Got it.
If I might, Jonathan is essentially correct, and the specific language was put in by Kalman, as I remember, so that if the executive committee chose to try to remove someone, that there was in our bylaws a mechanism to follow, as opposed to something that's just so general that someone could argue later, well, Why did they do that? Well, because you missed 3 consecutive meetings or whatever the case may be. That's really what that language was about. And I think it's not unreasonable language, and we don't adhere to it, strictly. It's just there if we need it. Thank you.
Hasn't come up since I've been on the board. I know that.
Steve, can I say something that's showed way?
Yeah, go for it, Joe.
I wanted to remind everybody what somebody had previously said. We had, and this is what I'm saying, is that we have had extremely active members that did not show up at the general meetings, and they worked tirelessly on other subcommittees that were extremely important. So they were very, very active on the board. However, had we religiously applied the absenteeism, they would be off the board. Now we get therefore into a difficult portion. If we religiously apply that absenteeism, there's going to be a notion, it's going to look like this favoritism, that these people are not being kicked off the board and the other people are being kicked off the board. And I didn't want to get into that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. People could have, family emergencies. There's all sorts of reasons why there could be justified non-attendance. So that is something that we should consider. There's only 6 minutes left before 8:30. So maybe that's something we can ponder, and, because I don't think we're going to get through B2 and B3 regarding.
Think about I'm sorry, but did I interrupt?
No, go ahead.
There's also some political implications, and we get along. We work very well with the council members that overlap with our district now, but we don't know who's. We have to set this up for the future. And if there's ever a council member who becomes offended by the removal of somebody who was appointed by that council member, that gets tricky too. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have the option to throw somebody off the board, but I think you members might want to think about implications that kind of go beyond your service here, and how who appointed you, and that's all. I made my point. Sorry, it's getting late. Ann Godette has her
I think
hand.
that's valid. Ann, you're on mute.
Hi. So I'm not sure if you can hear me, but can you go back to the black section? Where
Yes.
are we?
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah. So
B2 or B1? Where do you want to look?
So we're sort of going back and forth. I think it was, go down one more section, please.
Okay.
All right, so I like the idea of splitting out where the charter says one thing and then we wish to embellish it further. But by putting it under the guise of the executive committee, that's highly appropriate, and it sounds like it avoids petty disputes. So I think that that's a good way to handle that. Further, the idea of warning letters or not sending warning letters and overall participation, whether it be in committee work or showing up to the actual board meeting, the general meeting. We already discussed this shall send versus may send. So, we can we can rediscuss that next meeting. Do we want to leave it at shall? I think Nikki felt strongly that, her time, as is all of our time, is valuable. And so if there's less participation, but I think it was Joe who made the point about committee participation. I think people on the board tend to participate. There are some who I see with less regularity, but at some point perhaps they'll wane and flee, go elsewhere. But we can address that, and we should also put in something that speaks to excused absences, where a member has an incident or an episode within their personal or other life that makes it difficult for them to attend for this one, for a given time. And it's been communicated and approved by either the board chair or the district manager or somebody on the executive committee. I think that I'd like to see something that discusses excused absences in this when we reconvene, since we're moving to 8:30. Thank you.
Yeah, I like that idea. Does anyone else have their hands up? Thank you, Ann.
I do not believe so. I was just saying.
Before we close out, I think Joanne had mentioned an idea that if she wants to mention now, it would probably be for next meeting. Well, I think we'd get there next meeting. But if Joanne wanted to just preview that before we close out, she's more than welcome to. If she's still here.
Hey,
Oh.
I'm still here. Hey, so thank you for everyone on the committee for working so hard on the bylaws. I have edited our bylaws for our condominium, and I know how arduous this process is. So thank you. So before I bring my idea to you, I just want to, state a caveat that I don't want to discuss it right now. I really just want to plant the seed about this idea for the time that we get to the topical committees, because I don't want to belabor this meeting any further than it already has been brought this evening. So anyway, in looking at the topical committees and how they're represented, I would like to propose that we reorganize the topical committees. We consolidate 2 committees and we add a new committee, which I think is incredibly germane to what's going on in New York City right now. So the idea is to add a housing committee, or I really am so I'm just going to stick with transportation.
Joanne, you were cutting in and out for the past 10 seconds, Joanne. We lost
sorry,
you at like housing. That's right.
Okay, so
it's housing committee.
Just perhaps. So again, it's a housing committee, and then a consolidation of community environment with transportation. I think it's important. I mean, this all just really stemmed from HBD came to the district manager and had basically pitched that they wanted to do a fair with regards to violations and a whole bunch of other things that are germane to landlords and tenants. Have a committee that can, sort of sink their teeth into it. So I bring this to you without knowing the history of why we do not have a housing committee, but there are many community boards throughout New York City that do. So I'm just planting the seed. I would love for the committee to consider it and think about the history of why we do not have one and how beneficial that committee would be to the array of topical committees that we have right now. And that's all I have. And I, again, just really want to thank you for all of your hard work tonight.
Yeah, thanks. I want to echo that sentiment. Thanks everyone. I know it's a slog, but I appreciate everyone's opinions, and I think everyone's really giving us a lot to think about and helping us get through this. So I do appreciate it. And yeah, I think I don't want to have discussion of Joanne's suggestion now because obviously it's late. But yeah, so if we can keep that in mind for next time, and we'll look at we'll start with looking at 3A and 3B. We'll finalize language for 3A, the 3B where we left off, and we'll carry forward from there. And I will try to circulate an updated document with the following sections, with proposals based on what we've gotten so far earlier, certainly not the day of the next meeting. So if anyone wants to look ahead to 4 through 7 and highlight specific things that they want to see changed or at least discussed, feel free to send them my way, and I'll make sure in the outline and in the marked up document that's going to be circulated before the next meeting, we'll have that in there so folks can look at that in advance of the meeting. Anything else, Jonathan, before we close out?
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
So just some of the things Joanne is talking about, I think are very interesting and possibly very valuable. They're in section 4, which means that if we continue meeting once a month, we will get to talk about those things in depth by around the year 2030. So I do suggest that we try to meet more than once a month so that we might actually get through this document at some point while it's still valid. Thank you.
I was leaving this chat to my grandchildren, so that'll be too quick.
When is the next meeting, please?
I'm assuming
have-
it'll be early April, but we haven't scheduled it yet, right, Sean?
Yeah, we try to put it in before the for the board meeting, so it can be reported out to the full board when need be. But adding a monthly meeting with all of the other meetings that we have to have in order to meet our bylaws requirements on committee meetings, an additional, that's going to be hard. But I'll work with the chairs to try to do that if that's what the committee wants.
I would just want to add at this point that I think now that we've got a sense of the process, and I think we've come up with a bit of an approach that may work for us, what would expedite it is if anyone has strong opinions about what we should definitely include in the remainder of Article 3 membership through the Section 7, which I don't recall what it is off the top of my head right now. But if you have anything that you could put in writing and send to us, so that way we could compile it for us to review and sort of get all those things out before by the time the meeting starts. That way, when we review it, we're reviewing the actual language that people want to include. I think that would be helpful, and that would also give us a chance to compile it and make sense of it, so we could have a more efficient conversation around it. That would be my only suggestion to everybody here. Is if something really moves you, let's get the wording that you want to propose, and then let's incorporate it next week.
All right.
Other than that, I have nothing to add, and I'm grateful for everyone's time tonight.
Sean, if it's at all possible for us to meet twice a month, we might actually get through this, in my lifetime. So that's my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. All right, well, I think that's.
So we
it
don't know
on-
when the next meeting is? We can't pencil it in?
It's just the beginning of March now. Usually the calendar takes another week or so to right, Sean? I mean, to figure out when.
It'll either be the first Tuesday or the first Wednesday of April. I don't, the calendar. So pencil in.
How is there any holidays we got to watch out for?
Always.
Passover is the first Tuesday.
Is it possible to meet again at the end of March?
No, Glenn, because we have to have our meeting out to, our March calendar has already been submitted to the public, and we have.
Okay.
I have something on every single night of this month, every night, except for the 15th. So,
No, okay, I get it. You've got to.
I think April 6th is the date to pencil in. Does that conflict with?
It's good for me.
That'll work for me.
It is a holiday. It's Jewish holiday.
When's the holiday over? I'm sorry, Joe, give me the holiday dates.
Hold on a sec.
Passover is over by then. What holiday is it?
I'm sorry, you're right. Correct. It's over by the Sunday the 4th.
Yep.
It's the last night. So yeah, we're okay on the 6th.
Great.
Yep, works for me too. After Easter.
Okay, you want the 6th or the 7th?
6 sounds good.
Yeah, I can work with that.
I'm good.
Okay.
What day's the 6th?
Tuesday.
That's perfect.
As per Glenn's suggestion, can we also schedule another day in April towards the end?
Open to it if everyone wants to spend 4 hours of their month rather than 2. I don't want to oppose, but if folks want to do it.
Pencil in the 28th, but that has to be confirmed with everything else that we have to get, and we're still. Yeah, pencil in the 28th as a possibility. We're not meeting as a board until the 19th of April.
Okay. Sounds good.
Bylaws, when's Lag Bomer? Lag Bomer is the 29th, I think.
The 30th on my calendar it says, but yeah, it's not the 28th.
All right.
All right. Let's do it.
Okay.
All right. All
Very
right. Well,
good.
thanks so much, everyone. Very
Yep.
much
Thank you,
appreciate it.
everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Good
Thanks.
night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Steve, Jonathan, for doing this.
Thank you so much, Glenn. I really appreciate all your comments and help.
Thanks,
Thanks, folks.
gentlemen.
Have a good night.
Peace.